Chapter 7, where we continue talking about computer components and specifically gathering input. Now, in this video, you're going to learn about the different types of input and how you can learn them how you can use them in your program. You'll get a chance to collect input from a keyboard and store it in a variable. You'll get to write a program that takes user input and does something with it. And ultimately, you'll get comfortable using inputs to make your programs more interactive. It's time now to learn about inputs. Just like when we talked about outputs, inputs are all over in our lives. The keyboard that you might be using watching this video, when you swipe your finger across your smartphone, files and databases like we talked about in outputs, a mouse, sensors like a smart thermostat, or the thing that tells you when somebody's at your front door. All of those are different kinds of sensors, and there are a lot more in addition to that. So just like in output, for input, we're going to use a simplified way of gathering input that is text-based, and specifically from your keyboard. We're also going to be learning a pattern and following it as we look at inputs. It involves, first of all, showing the person who's going to be putting in the input what it is you want them to do in the form of a label, like, "What is your name?" ? And then giving them a prompt to put in their input. We're also going to make sure that whatever the person types in from the keyboard gets stored in a variable. We learned about variables in our last chapter. So here's an example of storing input into a variable. The variable that we're using here is called my name, and the stuff that's on the right side of the equal sign is going to collect the input. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But when I type in Bud, that then gets stored in a variable called my name, which is of a type string. Now we can get inputs that are strings, that are ints, that are floats, that are all types of different types of variables. In this specific scenario, we're looking at a string. So that kind of leads us to a little bit of a conversation about objects and methods. Objects and methods are about object-oriented programming, and we're not going to talk much about it until later chapters. But what you should know is that in order for us to use input, we first have to kind of set up that input. And so there's a library provided by Java with a capability called scanner. And what we do is we create an object from this capability called scanner using the line scanner input equals new scanner, blah, blah, blah. You don't really have to understand what that does, just that this creates an object called input that we can use. We have to do this before we can collect input. And then once the object called input is created, then we can use what we call in object-oriented programming a method, which is kind of like a function, to collect the input from the keyboard. That's what the .next part of that line is. There are a variety of different methods, like next, that we can look at. And when I tell the computer that I'm going to collect input, I also have to tell it what type of input to collect. So if I wanted to collect input that's of type int, then I would use the input method nextInt. And float and double, string and char both use the next method. And then I can even collect Boolean input using next Boolean. There are actually a bunch of other ones, but these are the standard ones that we'll be using as we learn inputs here. So welcome to our try exercise. So over the last few chapters, we've done a try for output. We've done a try for using variables. And now we're going to try for input. And there's going to be some things that are the same, but there's also going to be a few new things that we're going to introduce as a part of this try. But we're going to start out just the same as we do on all of these, where you're going to go to your project. We're going to right-click on source, new Java class. In this case, we're going to call this thing my first input. Got it. if you notice that when I was typing there, I accidentally put a space in, and so Java isn't going to want you to put a space in. It's going to give you an error if you were trying to type it that way like I was. And again, make sure upper and lower cases are good, and we're going to hit enter. All right. Now, this looks just like all the other ones that we've been using, but we're going to do something just a little different here. Because for input, we need to bring in a new library to use. And so I'm going to hit enter right here. And up here, I'm going to type import Java util scanner. Now, just make sure that's right. These are all lowercase. Scanner is uppercase. The reason why we have to do this for input and not for output is because Java comes with kind of some built-in functionality that is there for every program you run. But then it also has supplemental or additional functionality that we can pull in when we need it. And the scanner class is one of those. And so that's why we have to put that in. And you're going to see here in a minute how we get a chance to use it. Okay, but we're going to now do basically what we do on all of these. And I'm going to go down into the class section, my first input program, and I'm going to put here public static void main string. Boy, that looks familiar, right? Open squiggly brace. Now, we need to declare a variable so that we can put our input in. And this time we're going to be collecting something different. We're going to be collecting your name. And so that's not an integer, that's like a number. The type is a string. And this is kind of like other variables we would use. Just like the mailbox we've been visualizing in our head, this would have a type of string, and we're going to give it a name of my name and a semicolon, just like we do any other variable, okay? And so this is declared the variable myString. Okay, now we're going to deviate again a little bit from what we have done in our other programs. We need to set up the scanner to work. And we're going to do this in the same way, kind of, that we just did string my name, because the type of this variable is called scanner. And then the name that we're going to give the variable, we're going to call it input. Now, we have to do a few other things here. Just type them on in. Make sure you type them right. But essentially what this is doing is, because it's a little bit different type of a variable than the others, we need to set aside some memory for it and set it up just right and stuff like that. And that's what that does. So now we can use this input variable that's going to allow us to collect input. Okay, now we learned in our learn section about this pattern we're going to follow for input, where we're going to display a label, then we're going to collect the input, and then we can do whatever it is. We're going to store the input in a variable, and then we can do with it whatever it is we want. So let's start with our label. Now, we've been typing system.out.println. This case, we didn't put the ln on it. And the difference between print and println is just that, with print, it doesn't go to the next line after we're done. It just will stay there and wait on the same line. And you'll see why we want to do that. Oops. Not sure what I did there, but let's go back and keep going here. What's your name? Question mark. And we're going to put a space like we've done on these concatenations, but this isn't a concatenation here. Semicolon at the end. And now we're going to do two things at once. We're going to collect the input that I would type at the keyboard, and we're going to put it into the variable we created called my name at the same time. So we'll start here, my name equals. Now we're going to use that input variable, and this input variable is actually called an object, but we'll get to that when we talk about classes and objects. And this object has a function, in Java we call them a method, called next. And what happens is that it's going to collect everything that I type on the keyboard until I hit enter. And once I hit enter, it's going to take whatever that I typed, and it's going to put it in our variable we called my name. All right, now the last is going to look a lot like what we've done before. System out println this time, and we're going to say your name is, and a space, okay, and then plus my name. Same concatenation that we've done in our other programs. Okay, now let's run this thing. First, take a look at it, make sure semicolon, 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 open brace, close brace, open brace, close brace, open parentheses. Make sure you got all those right. Notice that the parentheses here are just empty, and that's okay, but you still have to have an open and a close. And now let's run this baby. So we're going to right click down here and go down to run. This is going to run just a little different because if you notice down here in our input, in the output section, what's your name? It actually went down the program. It ran this line, and then it's waiting for us to type something. So if you click down here, type your name. I'm going to just type Bob. I know that's not my real name. And it's waiting, it's waiting, it's waiting for input. And then I'm going to hit enter. Okay, and once I hit enter, it finishes. It puts what I typed into my name, and then it finishes the rest of the program. And notice the output is your name is Bob, and it would have been whatever it is you typed there. If you got something different than these results, take a look at your program, make sure you typed everything right, and go from there. Here are some more activities that you can try to learn even more about this topic.